So we've been reading about how life has got swallowed up into the material principle and how there's this struggle then to emerge. And
I didn't come last Thursday on purpose. My moral was down, and when I see this, I did well.
Yes. So, but Asvapati, even in that down state, he's seeing all the future possibilities that it represents. So I'm going to read on from the break. Page 141, Amrita, at the bottom. Then came a fierier breath of waking life, and there arose from the dim gulf of things the strange creations of a thinking sense, existences half real and half dream. A life was there that hoped not to survive. Beings were born who perished without trace. Events that were a formless drama's limbs, and actions driven by a blind creature will. A seeking power found out its road to form. Patterns were built of love and joy and pain, and symbol figures for the moods of life. An insect hedonism fluttered and crawled and basked in a sunlit nature's surface thrills, and dragon raptures, python agonies crawled in the marsh and mire and licked the sun. Huge armored strengths shook a frail quaking ground. Great puissant creatures with a dwarfish brain, and pygmy tribes imposed their small life drift. In a dwarf model of humanity, nature now launched the extreme experience and master point of her design's caprice, luminous result of her half-conscious climb on rungs twixt her sublimities and grotesques to massive from infinitesimal shapes, to a subtle balancing of body and soul, to an order of intelligent littleness. Around him, in the moment beats of time, the kingdom of the animal self arose, where deed is all, and mind is still half born, and the heart obeys a dumb, unseen control. The force that works by the light of ignorance, her animal experiment began, crowding with conscious creatures her world scheme. But to the outward only were they alive, Only they replied to touches and surfaces, and to the prick of need that drove their lives. A body that knew not its own soul within, there lived and longed, had wrath and joy and grief. A mind was there that met the objective world as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were kneaded by the shocks of sense. It captured not the spirit in the form. It entered not the heart of what it saw. It looked not for the power behind the act. It studied not the hidden motive in things, nor strove to find the meaning of it all. You'll start, Martin?
Then came a fiery breath of waking life. There arose from the dim gulf of things the strange creations of the thinking sense, existences half real and half dream.
It's a new stage, not just those single-celled creatures struggling to survive. It's some new development. But he says they're only half real. Let's read a little further, Bhuvana. We'll understand better if we read the next sentences.
A light was there that hoped not to survive. Beings were born who perished without trace. Events that were a formless drum of limbs and actions driven by a blind creature will.
So these are very short-lived creatures. And things happen, but there seems to be no plan or plot in them. Actions are just driven by this blind creature will. Perhaps it's not even instinct. It's just the will to survive. You'll read, please? Yeah.
A seeking power found out its road to form. Patterns were built of love and joy and pain, and symbol figures for the moods of life.
Yes, so behind all this development, there's a power. It's of course an expression of the Supreme Shakti, but working in this stage of primitive life, a seeking power. And at this point, it begins to find the way to make lasting forms. So that these patterns were built which can express certain emotions, love and joy and pain, symbol figures for the moods of life. If we think about animals and plants, no, we automatically connect some moods and emotions with certain forms. So that's beginning to happen. And he gives some very nice examples in the next sentences. Kamla.
But for the moods of life means it's because capital L had given.
Yeah, this is
so
life.
It is the life is starting.
Yes, yeah. No, this is all the life. But here, these are the moods, the many moods. He said they are infinite, the moods of life. No? But those were expressed in the subtle now they're beginning to correspond to particular physical forms. And these examples you will understand in the next sentence. Kamala.
And insect, hedonism, fluttered and curled, and basket in a sunlit nature's surface was, and dragon raptures, python adonis, crowded in the marsh, and where and flickered the sun.
Insects. He's speaking about a time when I think the earth was very hot and humid. There was lots of marshland and bog, and it's a time when the insects have developed. And that was a very important development because it also accelerated the varieties of plant life. So
What is hedonism?
hedonism means living for pleasure.
Great.
So those insects, what do? They are fluttering about, they're crawling, and they are basking. They feel the warmth of the sun, and there's a lot of sun in that time and air place. But these are all surface thrills. It's just what they feel on the surface. And the other things that he talks about are not insects, but reptiles. Apparently they also developed at about the same time. So dragon raptures, there must have been maybe the beginning of the dinosaurs, and the bigger kinds of lizards. And they also enjoyed all that sunlit nature, their own kinds of enjoyment. And python agonies. Pythons are very, very big snakes, and they're not poisonous. They crush their victims and eat them. But when they've eaten, then they may not need to eat another year or 2 years, maybe even. So they're quite tamasic during that time. But perhaps here when he says agonies, he's evoking for us the sufferings of the python's prey rather than of the python itself. The python just enjoys using its strength. So all those things are crawling in that marsh, that wet, boggy land, in that mire, that dirty mud. And they are very dependent on the light of the sun. Reptiles are cold-blooded creatures, and they can hardly move unless they get warmed up. They have to be nourished by the sun's energies. Sarojini.
Used are not strains of a trial whirling ground. The great bosom creature with them brown fields brain, and pygmy tribes impose their small line drift.
Yes. So these are two extreme forms, animal forms, which seem to have emerged at the same time. These huge armored strengths, these gigantic dinosaurs who, when they move the ground, that boggy ground shakes. They are very powerful creatures, but it seems that compared to their great size, they had very, very tiny brains. But at around the same time, it seems, the first small mammals also developed. These pygmy tribes, pygmy means very small creatures. But they could impose their small life drift, their way of life, because they were rather more intelligent than these great puissant creatures with dwarfish brains. So those pygmy tribes, we think, are somehow in our own line of evolutionary development. Rita.
In a dwarf model of humanity, nature now launched the extreme experience and master point of her design's caprice, luminous result of her half-conscious climb, on rungs twixt her sublimities and grotesques, too massive from infinitesimal shapes to a subtle balancing of body and soul, to an order of intelligent littleness.
So at this point, nature now launched, like launching a ship, setting off on an adventure, her extreme experience, something far beyond anything that's happened before, the master point of her design's caprice. She seems to be doing everything just without rhyme or reason, in a random way, but actually there's a purpose and a direction in her work. And what comes next is a luminous result. There's some light, some consciousness of this half-conscious climb of nature on rungs, one level and another level and another level. And that ladder, that golden ladder, we read about it, it goes in both directions, no? So it goes between nature's sublimities, her highest achievements, and her grotesques, these very weird, strange-looking, ugly creatures at the other end. No? And this rung of possibilities stretches from massive shapes to tiny, tiny little ones, infinitesimal, extremely small shapes. And she's been making all these different experiences. But what it's all aiming at is a subtle balancing of body and soul. So what she's reaching now at this point is an order of intelligent littleness. Joel.
Around him, in the moment beats of time, the kingdom of the animal self arose, where deep is old and mind is still half born, and the heart obeys a dumb, unseen control.
So this is what Āspaupati is seeing now, and in these moment beats of time, he's seeing the gradual appearance of the kingdom of the animal self, all the many, many different animal forms. And this animal self has certain characteristics which he's going to describe to us. For them, action, deed is all. And the mind is only partially there. And the heart obeys a dumb, unseen control. There may be emotional impulses, but they are not understood.
But in this sense, can you tell anything about ape and in between man and...
We are coming to it. Next page. Right?
Just, he said pygmy, giant and pygmy, then suddenly...
Yes, yeah. So pygmy here, I think it's just an adjective meaning very small creatures. Yeah. But I think it's the beginning of those first mammals. They were very, maybe small squirrels or rat-like creatures. Yes, but that was a very important development beyond the reptiles and the fish.
Because it was sudden one. All the creatures were crawling on the ground, and suddenly the bird it started flying, soaring.
Yes. Sorry, who's next? Ganga Lakshmi.
Yeah. The force that works by the light of ignorance. An animal experiment began, crowding with conscious creature her world scheme. But to the outward, only where they lie, only they reply to touches on surface, and pink the breath of need that drew their lives.
Their lives. Yes. So, these are all conscious creatures. All animals are more or less conscious. And they are conscious in a different way from the consciousness of plants. But still, they are only aware of outward things. There's no inner psychology yet. They're replying to touch, responding, reacting to touches and surfaces. But the main thing that's driving their lives is the sense of need, the need to survive. Lela.
A body that knew not its own soul within, there lived and longed, at wrath and joy and grief. A mind was there that met the objective world, as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were needed by the shocks of sense. It captured not the spirit in the form. It entered not the heart of what it saw. It looked not for the power behind the act. It studied not the hidden motive in things, nor strove to find the meaning of it all.
Yes. So these are basically bodies, these creatures. No, there's some consciousness there. It's not aware of its own soul within at all, but it does have emotions. It lives and it has longings. It can be angry, it can enjoy, it can suffer. And those beings do have a kind of mind. A mind that is aware, that meets the world around it, but it feels it as something alien and hostile, a stranger or an enemy, something threatening. And whatever little thoughts arise in this mind are needed by the shocks of sense. This word needed with a K at the beginning, it's actually what we do with bread. You know? We knead it with our hands, shape it, bring it alive with that kneading. It becomes more alive, and then it rises, becomes eatable. So those thoughts are shaped with these shocks of sense. It's all the sense impressions that are waking up the consciousness in these beings. And that mind doesn't have any real understanding or insight. It doesn't get hold of the spirit that's inhabiting its own forms or other forms. It doesn't penetrate deeply into what it sees, doesn't enter into the heart of what it sees. It doesn't look why things are happening. What are the powers? What are the reasons behind the action? There's no beginning of studying why it should be like this, the hidden motive in things. There's no striving to find the meaning of all this experience. It's just reaction to sense impressions. Amrita.
Beings were there who wore a human form, absorbed their lived in the passion of the sixth skin, but knew now who they were or why they lived, content to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act. Life had for them no aim save nature's joy, and the stimulus and delight of outer things identified with the spirit's outward shell. They walked for their bodies once, they clothed no more.
Yes. So this is back in the beginning of our human history. These beings that looked somehow human, or beginning to be human, but they're not human in consciousness. They live absorbed in the passion of the scene and all that stimulus, but didn't know anything about who they were, why they were alive. For them it was just enough to survive, to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act. They're identified with the outward shell of the spirit, this outer body. They enjoy the stimulus and delight of outer things, and they make an effort. They consciously work for certain things. We see this even in certain animals. They worked for the bodies once, but they didn't think about anything further than that. Nidish.
The veiled spectator, watching from their depths, fixed not his inward eye upon himself, now turned to find the author of the plot. He saw the drama only and the stage.
So there is a veiled spectator. There is some observing Purusha consciousness in these beings. The veiled spectator watching from the depths. Those beings couldn't exist if that presence weren't in them. But he's not turning his eye inward to himself. He's not asking, as perhaps we begin to ask at a later stage, how has all this come about? Where is the author of this plot? He only sees all this outward drama going on, and the stage, the setting. Would you like to read, Ma'am?
He saw the drama only on the stage. There was no brooding stress of deeper sense. The burden of reflection was not born. Mind looked on nature with unknowing eyes, adored her wounds, and feared her monstrous strokes. He pondered not on the magic of her laws. He thirsted not for the secret wells of truth, but made a register of crowning facts.
Go on till you come to a full stop.
Oh. And strong sensations on a vivid thread. It hunted and it fled and sniffed the winds, or slothed inert in sunshine and soft air. It sought the engrossing contacts of the world, but only to feel the surface sense of bliss.
Thank you. So the mind is there, but it's looking on nature without knowledge and understanding. There may be some sense of worship, adoring the boons, the gifts, the blessings that nature gives, and some sense of fear of, sometimes she gives monstrous strokes, big blows. But that mind is not pondering, it's not thinking about the magic of nature's laws. And there's no thirst yet, no yearning for the secret wells of truth. But instead what it's doing, and it's a very important stage in development, is making a register of crowding facts, collecting memories and impressions and sensations, remembering sensations and collecting them on a thread like making a necklace. That accumulation of sensation, of experience is very important. So those beings hunted or ran away from being hunted, and they sniff the winds to see what's coming, what's approaching, or they just bask, slothed, inert, lazily in sunshine and soft air. If they've had enough to eat, if there's no immediate danger, that's what they do. It's sought for, it's wanting and looking for the engrossing contacts of the world, the sensations, of the awareness of the world around it. But that is not for any deeper purpose, but only to feed the surface sense with bliss, with a certain kind of delight. Alice.
These felt loves quivered in the outward touch. They could not feel behind the touch, the soul. To guard their feeling of self from nature's harm, to enjoy and to survive was all their care.
Yes, this is the animal consciousness. There's the awareness, life's quiver in the outward touch, but no awareness of anything deeper than that. They're very alert to protect their own individual form of self from any harm that might come, and then to enjoy and to survive. That's all that they care about. Lorraine.
The narrow horizon of their days was filled with things and creatures that could help and hurt. The world's values hung upon their whole self, isolated, cramped in the vast unknown. To save their small lives from surrounding death, they made a tiny circle of defense against the siege of the huge universe. They preyed upon the world and were its prey, but never dreamed to conquer and be free.
Thank you. So we still have this in us, no? This kind of consciousness that's only obsessed with the things and creatures that can help us and harm us, and our values hang upon our little self, what's advantageous and delightful to us. And we may feel very isolated, cramped, cut off, and at the same time cramped in the huge universe. So what's important in that level of our being is to save our own small lives from all the threats surrounding death. And because of that, we're willing to join with other beings to make a tiny circle of defense against the siege of the huge universe. So they're hunting, preying on the world, getting whatever they can, and they in turn are getting preyed upon. But the possibility of being free and in control doesn't enter into the consciousness at this stage at all.
Shraddhavan, we know Sri Aurobindo wrote a lot, but was he reading extensively also? Because this corresponds to the scientific
Yes.
explanation of evolution.
Yes. So I don't know how much he was reading at the time when this was written, but of course there was a time when he was reading voraciously before coming to Pondi. He was definitely keeping up with all the developments and
He was reading Greek and Latin and...
but even, no, I mean, after he left university and he was no longer so much focused on the classics, we know that every week huge packets of books arrived from Europe, and not only in English but in other languages. He was really keeping himself informed.
At the ashram.
Before coming to the ashram, before, when he was in Baroda.
Baroda, he was working
Yes,
in.
yes. So then I think when he took up his political struggle, then perhaps he was not reading so much like that. But we mustn't forget that his mind was not like this mind. He was really open to all these mental currents that were going on. No?
Yes, of course he is giving the sense, but the facts. This evolution from the single cell and etc.
Yeah.
This is also
somehow.
science, you know.
Yes, this is what we know. We have learned somehow from whatever small science studies or reading we have done. I think he had other means of being aware also. And I think all this, perhaps we can particularly say Book 2, this exploration of King Aswapati. Nirodha has told us, no? This is Sri Aurobindo's autobiography. So he had all these experiences. He is Aswapati. He's seen all this somehow happening. And of course he wrote it down only much later, 20 or 30 years later. Yeah? Maybe I just read one more sentence and then we'll stop today. Obeying the world powers, hints, and firm taboos, a scanty part they drew from her rich store. There was no conscious code and no life plan. The patterns of thinking of a little group fixed a traditional behavior's law. Ignorant of soul save as a wraith within, tied to a mechanism of unchanging lives, and to a dull usual sense and feelings beat, they turned in grooves of animal desire. So the world powers' hints and taboos are coming to them through their senses, from their experiences that they get. No? And this immense store of riches of nature, they can only draw a very small, inadequate part from that. They haven't formed any conscious code of behavior or of living, no life plan. They were living in little groups, and each little group had its own pattern of thinking and its own fixed traditional behaviors, law. So if they came across another little group who were not exactly like them, probably there'd be a war about it. No? They were not aware of their soul at all, perhaps just as a kind of ghost, a wraith within. So their lives are tied. There are certain things that always have to be done. No? This dull, usual sense, very few really exceptional experiences. They're turning in grooves, fixed grooves, around and around the grooves of animal desire, driving the bodies. No? So there's much more about this early stages of human lives, but we'll stop there for today.
Then came a fierier breath of waking life, and there arose from the dim gulf of things the strange creations of a thinking sense, existences half real and half dream. A life was there that hoped not to survive. Beings were born who perished without trace. Events that were a formless drama's limbs, and actions driven by a blind creature will. A seeking power found out its road to form. Patterns were built of love and joy and pain, and symbol figures for the moods of life. An insect hedonism fluttered and crawled and basked in a sunlit nature's surface thrills, and dragon raptures, python agonies crawled in the marsh and mire and licked the sun. Huge armoured strengths shook a frail quaking ground. Great puissant creatures with a dwarfish brain. And pygmy tribes imposed their small life drift. In a dwarf model of humanity, nature now launched the extreme experience and master point of her design's caprice, luminous result of her half-conscious climb on rungs twixt her sublimities and grotesques, to massive from infinitesimal shapes, to a subtle balancing of body and soul, to an order of intelligent littleness. Around him in the moment beats of time, the kingdom of the animal self arose, where deed is all and mind is still half-born, and the heart obeys a dumb, unseen control. The force that works by the light of ignorance, her animal experiment began, crowding with conscious creatures her world scheme. But to the outward only were they alive, only they replied to touches and surfaces, and to the prick of need that drove their lives. A body that knew not its own soul within, there lived and longed, had wrath and joy and grief. A mind was there that met the objective world as if a stranger or enemy at its door. Its thoughts were kneaded by the shocks of sense. It captured not the spirit in the form. It entered not the heart of what it saw. It looked not for the power behind the act. It studied not the hidden motive in things, nor strove to find the meaning of it all. Beings were there who wore a human form. Absorbed they lived in the passion of the scene, but knew not who they were or why they lived. Content to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act, life had for them no aim save nature's joy, and the stimulus and delight of outer things. Identified with the spirit's outward shell, they worked for the body's wants. They craved no more. The veiled spectator, watching from their depths, fixed not his inward eye upon himself, nor turned to find the author of the plot. He saw the drama only and the stage. There was no brooding stress of deeper sense. The burden of reflection was not borne. Mind looked on nature with unknowing eyes, adored her boons and feared her monstrous strokes. It pondered not on the magic of her laws. It thirsted not for the secret wells of truth, but made a register of crowding facts and strung sensations on a vivid thread. It hunted and it fled and sniffed the winds, or slothed inert in sunshine and soft air. It sought the engrossing contacts of the world, but only to feed the surface sense with bliss. These felt life's quiver in the outward touch. They could not feel behind the touch the soul. To guard their form of self from nature's harm, to enjoy and to survive was all their care. The narrow horizon of their days was filled with things and creatures that could help and hurt. The world's values hung upon their little self. Isolated, cramped in the vast unknown, to save their small lives from surrounding death, they made a tiny circle of defense against the siege of the huge universe. They preyed upon the world and were its prey, but never dreamed to conquer and be free. Obeying the world power's hints and firm taboos, a scanty part they drew from her rich store. There was no conscious code and no life plan. The patterns of thinking of a little group fixed a traditional behavior's law. Ignorant of soul save as a wraith within, tied to a mechanism of unchanging lives and to a dull usual sense and feelings beat, they turned in grooves of animal desire.